My name is Mirelsie Velázquez, and I am an Associate Professor of Educational Studies and the Rainbow Family Presidential Professor at the University of Oklahoma. My book, Puerto Rican Chicago, Schooling the City, 1940 to 1977, due out in January, chronicles the Puerto Rican community's response to the urban decay in which they were forced to live, work, and especially learn in the city following their migration, demonstrating that the work began by schooling agents in Puerto Rico in 1898 was continued by Chicago officials after 1940. The book offers a historical reading of how the Puerto Rican community acknowledged and confronted the intricate ways their claim to space in Chicago was linked to schooling inequalities and challenges. One of the things I most enjoyed working on while writing the book is how Puerto Ricans began to utilize print culture while working across ethnic, racial, and gender differences in order to lay claim and transform social spaces through community activism, something that I was able to explore with the text that I look at. From the Young Lords newspapers, the community newspaper El Puerto Riqueño, and the Rican Journal, as well as the writing, students at Northeastern Illinois University offered an alternative reading of the community, as mainstream newspapers did not have local Puerto Rican writers providing community accounts, nor did they celebrate the success of the community and its children. Instead, as I argue in the book, mainstream newspapers created a monolithic portrayal of Puerto Ricans in the city, perpetuating misconceptions regarding the community. What the book also explores is how young women and youth in general were instrumental in the development of activist communities, challenging patriarchy-centered histories and theorizations of the migratory and settlement patterns adopted by Puerto Ricans in the diaspora. By highlighting the lives of young Chicago Puerto Rican women in particular, such as Maria Celda, Carmen Valentin, and Rita Ramirez, as their participation moved them beyond the traditional domestic sphere in which they had been co-signed to roles as wives or as domestic workers and into the public sphere where they assumed positions as community leaders, school teachers and administrators, and students, Puerto Rican Chicago deepens our understanding of women as political subjects, and the increased participation of young women set the stage for broader community mobilization. As I discuss in the book, the struggle for Tule High School and the Humboldt Park community demonstrates how important it was for Puerto Ricans to take the lead in conversations about their children's futures. The activism that emerged from the 1966 uprising and ensuing activism in Chicago centered around the struggle for school reform and control within the Puerto Rican community, in particular in the fight for Tule and Clemente High School. These conversations both addressed the school's physical structures and engaged in intense battles over who would lead the Puerto Rican children within the schools. The case of Tule High School, which was subsequently renamed Roberto Clemente High School, is central to that story. As we know, to obtain justice for their children, communities of color spent the 1960s and 70s battling with school administrators to combat oppressive school reform policies, sometimes with success. Although there is a growing historiography on Latino, Latinx education, Puerto Ricans are not readily represented in the literature. What I explore across the book is how coloniality, the relationship between the United States and Puerto Rico, is a critical site to challenge the limited status of representation of Latina, Latino, Latinx communities in the history of U.S. education. As I hope readers will understand or take away with them when they read the book, is how the Puerto Rican community in Chicago, a community in context flux, achieved and continues to achieve real results in the lives of school children. And central to this story is an understanding of the space and the place that the community occupies in the city's history. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy reading the book.